everybody, welcome back. This episode, I was going to take my CV carburetor off and install my S&S Super E. Been talking about it for a while now. And we are going to put the S&S Super E on, just not this episode, because I thought, hey, what a wasted opportunity. Instead of just taking the CV carb off and putting it to the side, let's talk about it. I've had CV carbs on all of my Harleys ever since I started riding, and I love them. You can really tune these carburetors if you know what you're doing. I want to explain how the carburetor works, all the parts on it, how to tune it, how to jet it, especially for all the chopper guys and gals out there that have straight pipes, drag pipes, high flow air cleaners, no air cleaner, just a screen or a velocity stack. So let's go ahead and take a look at my bike. I'm going to cold start it for you. I've got the air cleaner all the way off so you can see right into the throat of the carburetor. We're going to run it, and then I'm going to take that carb off. We're going to stick it on the bench here, and we're going to really dive in and talk about it. So without further ado, let's start up my chopper. So we've got cold pipes right here, and just going to go ahead and start her up, throw a little choke on, and yeah, let's do her. So sweet. Feast your little eyes on these beauties. I just rode my bike around the block a couple of times after showing you that cold start and let the bike cool down and pulled these plugs, and I'm telling you, I cannot be happier with how these plugs are looking right now. This is perfect setup. You've got a tan color on this insulator right here, and the center electrodes and the side electrodes are clean and looking really nice. There is a little bit of black around here on the rim, and that's exactly what I'm looking for. You do not want to have any white anywhere. You don't want to have a white electrode, or you don't want to have any white anywhere. That means you're running way too lean. And you don't want to have excessive black, like black soot, to where you can't even make out any of these components, so just pitch black. You definitely don't want to have wet black either. That means you're running far too rich. This is exactly what you'd be wanting to look for right here. I think it's time that we cruise around this carburetor and kind of point out some specific things that are relevant. Of course, this is the front of your carburetor where you're going to bolt on your air cleaner, and this is the back where you're going to shove it onto your intake manifold. First off, of course, here is your choke with a choke relocator bracket. This is the fuel inlet right here, which this is aftermarket. The stock inlets are plastic, so this is a brass, and it's also a high flow. It has a larger diameter. This is your float bowl breather. This is your atmospheric air intake for your vacuum slide chamber up here. This is your vacuum slide. This is your needle right down here. This is the collar of your needle jet. This is your accelerator pump nozzle. This is your atmospheric air jets for the main jet and the pilot jet. This is your float bowl. These are aftermarket standoffs. So moving over to this side, you've got your idle adjustment right here, and that's not to be confused with idle mix screw on the back. This is your throttle cable perch or bracket. The ferrule of your throttle cable will slide right into this hole here. Then the cable will ride along that little recess there and go up into this perch. This little linkage right here activates the rod for your accelerator pump. As you can see, it just moves a little bit and then this gives way, so it only has to pump down just a little bit. Here you've got your butterfly, which is directly connected to your throttle, and this is your vacuum port for the VOS system, and that's your vacuum operated electronic switch. This is where your choke screws into the body of your carburetor, and this is your idle mix screw, or what some people call an air fuel mixture screw. Right here, if you didn't want to drop your float bowl, there's a little plug here that you can take off to drain the fuel, and this is your overflow tube for your float bowl. So that is the exterior components of the carburetor. Here's another illustration to remind you of where all of the ports are at and vents and where things are and what's what. So I'm going to take the top of the carburetor off first because that gives me a really nice flat area to work on when I'm taking the float bowl off. This hardware here that I have has been replaced, so this isn't the factory stuff. But if you did have factory hardware, this particular bolt here would be a little bit longer than the rest. Alright, once you have all of the hardware removed off the top of your lid here, just go ahead and keep a finger on there because there is a spring underneath here. It's not under a tremendous amount of load, but it will kind of pop your lid off here. So just go ahead and take the lid off. You'll go ahead and grab this little spring out of there, set that to the side. Then what you can do is just make sure that the seal here around your diaphragm is looking good and that it was in there, it didn't get pinched. You can reach inside the throat of the carburetor and just lift up on your vacuum slide and pull it right out of there. And you're gonna look and just take a visual on this thing. You're gonna look for any cracks or even pinholes with a bright light behind this thing, just to make sure that you have proper seal right here for vacuum. Then you're gonna dump out this little plastic guy here that keeps your needle down, and then your needle comes out of here. And this is the nail head style needle. There's another aftermarket needle that has 5 slots in it with a C-clip, and we'll talk about that later. Then you just kind of take a look at the inside of this area and just make sure that it all looks good. And it's relatively clean, to be honest. If you were running excessively rich, it would be very black in here. Right here is your accelerator pump, and let's go ahead and take that off real quick and we'll take a peek inside. Just like the other one, you'll want to keep your finger on this cover. It has a spring underneath this as well, and depending on your model, you may have 1 or 2 O-rings and a little ball. So we'll go ahead and take this cover off here, and I only have 1 O-ring. The other secondary O-ring would be here, and there would be a ball over here depending on your model. Here's your spring on the top, and this diaphragm here has a ridge on the bottom side of the diaphragm, and that ridge on the bottom side will rest inside this recess in the carburetor. Now I'm just going to grab my wrench and break these standoffs loose for my float bowl, and as you can see, it's so much easier than using the Phillips, and they get stripped out so easily. Before I found these, I was swapping all my hardware over to an Allen key, which is also great, but these long standoffs sure make it easy. Alright, we'll go ahead and just pull straight up, and as you can see, this little rod over here is the rod that pushes your accelerator pump. And it looks really nice. Let's go ahead and turn the carb around. Now this is the front of the carb here, and now that we have the float bowl off, here's the float, and this is the idle mix screw. This right here is your main jet that's threaded into the emulsion tube. This recess way down inside here is your pilot jet, or sometimes referred to as a slow jet or an idle jet. And this is your choke jet, and there's nothing that you can do with this jet. You don't have to ever worry about replacing that. This illustration shows the bottom of the carburetor with the float bolt off and all of your jets. I've got you in close here to take a look at the float rod tower, and some models have an arrow right here cast into the body of the carburetor pointing this way. And what that arrow represents is the direction that the rod gets removed, not the direction that the rod gets installed. It'll just slide out that way. When you put it in, you kind of have to tap it in a little bit, and it will, it's a compression fitting, so it's tapered, and it'll just lock itself in here. These two wings right here that come out, they have to cradle that rod in between these two here. If it's hanging out too far on one side, your float cover won't go on. So it has to be centered in between these two. What I like to use to remove the pin is a spring center punch. Let's go ahead and see if we can just ram this out a little bit. Let's try one more. Give it a really light tap with a screwdriver handle, and just support the carburetor a little bit on this other side. Just give it a tiny tap. There it goes. Cool. And our float comes out. Let's take a look at the float valve for a second. You can see that this rubber coned tip right here has a ring that goes right around this area, and that's where it seals on float valve seat inside the carb here. Now this can create a little ridge from sitting on that seat over and over as it bobs up and down. If you have a rebuild kit and it comes with it, of course swap it out. But if you don't have a rebuild kit and you're just doing a little freshen up, run your finger across that and make sure that you don't have a very obvious detent or a ridge right there. I should also note how this goes on. It's just a very easy slide over this tang. It just slides over the tang, if I can get my fingers to work. Just a little metal clip and a little tang right here. So you just push it up from the bottom and have that little metal loop go over the tang, and it just hangs there. Now let's go ahead and take the main jet out. And the main jet, again, is threaded into the emulsion tube. And we will take the emulsion tube out as well, because on top of that is the needle jet. Get a nice screwdriver that fits this slot very nicely. You don't want to have one too small to where, like, say like this one, it's just way too small for this job. You want the screwdriver to definitely go all the way down to the base of the slot and not just riding on top. So you really want to dig around your screwdrivers and find one that really fits well, because these are just brass. And they all have the jet stamping on top. This is your emulsion tube, and I wonder, look at that, I got the right wrench for it right here. That's kind of cool to know that my standoffs are the same wrench. Let me just make sure. Oh yeah. So there is your emulsion tube, and you can see the little holes on the sides. You definitely, when you're cleaning your carburetor out, definitely want to take this and blast it with your carb cleaner. The needle jet can be installed incorrectly, and you just need to take a quick look at it to make sure that it's going in correctly. The way I have it orientated right now is the correct way. You see this band right here? The band is lower or closer to the bottom. That's how you want it to go into the carb. Your emulsion tube will be on the bottom of that, and your main jet will be on the bottom of that. And your needle from your vacuum slide will be in the throat of your carburetor, and that will go in here. The opening on the top is much larger than the opening on the bottom. You can see it, that's so much smaller than the top. So just make sure that you've got it in there correctly, or you'll be chasing some crazy gremlins and you won't know what's going on with your bike. Now, to get the pilot jet out, you'll need a small screwdriver, but you don't want too small of a screwdriver, and I would argue that this screwdriver is just a little bit too small. There's too much wiggle in this, and I believe the blade itself is just a little too thin. I went through my screwdriver drawer and found one that's pretty dang close. However, it is a little bit too wide. So what I'm gonna do is, and what I've done in the past, I just can't find it right now, is grind off this shoulder, grind off that shoulder, and then if I need to, I'll grind off a bit of the tip until it's a really snug fit. Hopefully you can see that I just knocked off this shoulder and that shoulder, and I tested it in here. Boy, does that not move at all. I don't have to take any of the tip off. Make sure you have a really good screwdriver. And there we are, we already broke it free. And there's your pilot. Little pilot jet. Let's go ahead and turn the carb around again so that you can get a better view at the idle mix screw here, or the air fuel mixture screw. If you're looking at your carburetor and you don't have a screw, all you have is what looks like an aluminum flat plug right there. It's called a Welch plug, and it's set there from the factory because they didn't want you to mess around with the air fuel mixture on your carburetor. But it's just a thin little plug. What you do is just drill a tiny little hole in it. You can use a pick and just pry that thing out of there. And once you pry it out of there, you'll see that you have down inside, just like with the pilot jet, there'll be a flat tip screw in there. And I would suggest that you take that out and you purchase something like this that's a knurled adjuster. Once you're seated, just half, one, oops, half, two. And that would be your starting point. But let's go ahead and take mine all the way out and we'll see what is in here. And for when I do this, I like to have it facing the right side, because inside here there's a very small spring, there's a very small washer, and an equally small O-ring. So you want to make sure that you don't lose those things, and you may actually have to pick them out, especially the O-ring. Sometimes it gets wedged up in there. Let's see what I come out with. I have the spring and the washer, and I'm telling you, this washer is itty bitty and it's super thin. I just grabbed some baling wire and just cut a chunk out of it. It's probably way too long. Bend it over, and then what I'm going to do is I'm going to cut that off. Let's see if we can do that. Okay, so I've got a little tiny hook on the end of this guy. There you are. I can see it. Let's see if I can fish it out of there. Oh, well, it just... Oh, I think I got it. Oh, what? First try. So there's the little tiny O-ring right there. And equally as small is that little tiny washer. Some guys I've seen online, they'll take this and just turn it upside down and put it down in there. The problem I have with that is you're not sure if these fell off at the very last minute and now they're turned around inside here, and you don't know if they are. So what I like to do is I like to stack it up the way it should be stacked, which is just like that, and bring the carburetor to it. And this is what I mean. Just take that and keep it all stacked the way it should be stacked. Press that guy up there and then get it started. That way nothing fell off. So let's go ahead and reassemble the carburetor here. And what we'll do is we've got our needle jet right here, and we know which way we're going to put it in now. We're going to put it in just like this with the large opening down. and that's going to go right in there. Boop. And then you're going to take your emulsion tube, and that just goes right on top of that. Take your wrench and just kind of snug it. You don't ever want to go He-Man on any of this stuff. And you have your main jet, and your main jet screws right on the top of that. Just give it a little snuggie right there. And then you have your pilot jet, and your pilot jet just drops right in that hole. And you got your brand new handy dandy screwdriver meant for the job, and then just give it a snug, and that's looking good. We're going to have the float valve just dip right inside the float valve seat, and we're going to grab our rod and put it right through this side. It's going to be the exact opposite way of how we took it out, and just kind of line it up, and there it is. So now to set it home. So what I've done is I've found a deep socket, and what I'm going to do is I just place it underneath the other tower, and then I can just grab my little punch, just use another screwdriver on top of the punch, and just kind of tap it in. I'm not hitting this thing hard at all. There we go. And you just want to make sure that it's even on both sides, which it looks like it is. Let's just go ahead and zero it out. There we go. And we'll raise this guy up to roughly, you know, it's in the ballpark between 15 degrees and 20 degrees, so that's where we're at. And now take a look at that float. It's really nice. Pushes in, bounces back, lift up, bounce back, and if you can see that, the line is perfect. Now you can put a dial caliper on here and really hone it in, but if you don't have one, just make sure that that is as close to parallel as you can get it. If you can't, if it's way off, let me show you how to do it. You can have a rich or a lean mixture just based on your float, and the way that works is if your float was set way down like this, which would be a lean mixture because you're not allowing enough fuel into your float bowl, you can drain your float bowl quick and then it's starving and it's a lean mixture. If you have your float bowl set to where it's way up high like this, that's going to be a rich mixture, because not only is it a ton of fuel inside your float bowl, it'll overlap onto your jets, it'll possibly leak outside of your float bowl, and either one of those settings are not optimum. What you want is this seam right here of the float bowl to be exactly parallel with the mating surface of your float bowl, and that's going to be right there. Now when you push like this, there's a little spring inside the float valve. You can feel that it seats right there, and then past that it's actually pushing on the little spring inside the float valve. So you just want to tap it up, like we said, 15 degrees to 20 degrees, make your setting there. Now to make your setting, there's a little tab that we were showing you earlier that's right there, and if you were to take this and bend it out, that would allow this thing to drop down way lean. And if you were to push this tab in towards the carburetor, that's going to make your float bowl go way up to where you have a rich mixture. So whatever direction you need to bend your little tab, I would take this hooked little pick and don't put a whole bunch of undue pressure on your float, because it's all plastic. You can do this while it's in the carb. You don't need to take it off, because this little tab right here bends so incredibly easy. It's the thinnest thing around. All you need to do is take your little hook like this and you slide it underneath the little tang, hold on to the float so it doesn't move, and then just rotate up a little bit. Like I said, you do not need to move it much. A little bit goes a long way. And if you need to go the other way, you can just hold on to this and just press down. Hold on to the float like this and just press down on it, and it will move, and it'll move quick. So just make tiny little adjustments, put it back on that 15 to 20 degree incline, make sure that it's right where you want it, and then you'll know that you're set with your float. It is a good idea to replace the gasket. However, you don't need to. If you're doing, you know, a roadside repair, or you're just changing your jets and you're doing stuff like that, you're not going to replace a gasket every time you take the float bowl down. You'll know if it doesn't seal is if you put it on and it starts leaking, well then obviously go get yourself a gasket. If you bought a kit and you've got one in your kit, well then go ahead and put it on. You want to make sure to have your accelerator pump rod installed. Now that's the hole right there in the linkage that it goes into, but it goes in from the back side. Hang on, I'll get it. There it goes. And then just prop your carb up and make sure that you have your little boot on there. Some carbs didn't have a boot. What you'll do is line up your accelerator pump nozzle into this hole here, and then your accelerator pump into the boot right there. Just go ahead and rotate that rod up. Put that into the boot. Come on, there you go. And then the accelerator pump nozzle goes into that hole there, and then it just kind of rocks down, kind of shimmies down. It should go flat without any hardware. All right, so we're gonna go ahead and reassemble the accelerator pump. And it's worth mentioning that the O-ring here isn't like a regular O-ring. And let me just go ahead and pop this out. Let's just take a look and see if we can see the flat side. There we go. There's a little bit of sheen to it. Anyway, that's the flat side there versus the round side there. So the round side up, the flat side down, and you can see it's just flat inside that recess. And we just go ahead and put the flat side down, and there you go. And the ridged area on the outside goes down into this recess right here into the casting of the carb. So the ridge down into the recess, just like that. Put it there, and I take my carburetor to my cover because I don't want that O-ring to fall out. It's kind of a juggle, but you take your spring, set up your spring, make sure your O-ring doesn't drop out. You can look at it the entire time, and I know for sure it's where it's supposed to be. Hold your finger down on it, and then you can start your hardware. You know, one more thing I'd like to talk about is just the idle adjustment. And when you thread it in, it's going to increase the RPMs, just like as if you were twisting your throttle. And if you back it out, well, of course, it's going to lower your RPMs. But what's actually happening when you do that? It's not just messing around with your butterfly. What's actually going on, let me just zoom in here, focus in here just a little bit. Inside the throat of the carburetor, when the butterfly opens up, take a look for little tiny ports. See those ports right there? Just behind the butterfly. So you've got this right down here, of course, is your idle mix screw, or your air fuel mix screw, and that port is right there. And so you can adjust that, and it's going to react whether you have your butterfly open or not in idle. That's why it's your idle mix screw. But if you wanted to increase your RPMs at idle, and you screwed your idle down to increase your RPMs, what you're doing is you're opening up another port from your pilot jet. I mean, there's like a little bit of adjustment. You can see one, and there's two that kind of show up, and a little bit more. And you can see that those ports are coming up from your pilot jet. Here's a diagram showing those idle ports and also the choke port and just everything going on and the back of the carburetor on the intake side. So this is the needle for the vacuum slide, and you can see it kind of has a nail head on the top of it, and if you look at the top of that head, it'll have a number stamped into it. And all the carburetors from 1989 to 06 had an N85. This happens to be an N65. And this needle was only offered in one CV in 1988. And the reason for that is because the 88 model didn't have an accelerator pump. And to compensate for no accelerator pump, they had a much narrower, skinnier, tapered needle so that it would flow more fuel through the needle jet. In 89, they introduced the accelerator pump, and then they fattened up the taper, so it's a thicker tapered needle and doesn't flow as much fuel. Let's go ahead and reassemble the rest of this. So the needle that I was talking about goes right inside that needle jet right there. The collar that you can see that we were talking about earlier goes right in there. So let's reassemble the vacuum slide, and here it is here. What we're going to do is we're just going to drop this needle right inside. We've got our little plastic piece right here. We're just going to drop on top of that. There's only one way that this can go inside the carb. It won't fit one way. It just won't line up. It is off-centered so that you can't screw it up. So you spin it, and now it slides in, no problem. Make sure that the bottom ridge of that diaphragm goes into the recessed area of the carb casting, and don't forget your spring that goes inside. Go ahead and take your cap and lay it right down on top and put your hardware in. This illustration shows more in detail about the velocity needle jet and the different needles. What do you say we give you a quick and dirty bullet list of what to do to set up your carb when you put on straight pipes right now? First thing, make sure that you have either new plugs or you've cleaned your plugs really good. Spray them with carb cleaner, hit them with a wire brush, and install a 180 in your main jet and a 48 into your pilot jet. Make sure that your float is set correctly. Set your idle mix screw at the back of your carb underneath at 2 full turns out from the seat. Set your idle adjustment screw a half turn down from where it touches the throttle plate here. So I'll back mine off until it doesn't touch at all, and we're going to thread it down until it just kisses right about there, and then 1/2 turn further, and that's where you're going to set that. Then just make sure you have gas, turn your petcock on, pull your choke up, start your bike, see how it runs. Here's a quick guide chart to reference when you're fine-tuning your bike, so go ahead and take a screenshot of it. I've got a crusty throttle here that we're going to mimic you twisting your throttle on your bike, and you're gonna hear my great impersonation of a Harley V-twin motor. What you're gonna do is you're going to do very quick blips of the throttle. We're not cracking it all the way. We're just gonna go like that. Just that amount. Just bam. This is my impersonation of a good, perfectly tuned bike with no backfires or anything like that, but like the rich and the lean are set perfectly, okay? Okay? The idle comes back quickly. The idle doesn't go high, the idle doesn't go low. The idle comes right back, real snappy. Now, if you have a lean mixture, the RPMs are going to go up high with your blip, but they're going to stay there for a while and ride out until they finally come back down. So it's going to sound kind of like this. Okay, that's a lean mixture. Rich is you're feeding it way too much fuel and it's falling on its face and it's having to eat through all that fuel before it can come back up to idle. So it's going to drop before, and sometimes if it's really excessive, you can actually stall your bike out. But it's going to drop and then finally climb back. So it's going to be blump, 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 blump. Okay? So hope you got a kick out of my sound effects. You've got a carb that starts, it idles, it runs, it's got a good throttle response, but you need to find your sweet spot. How the heck do you find that? Well, the sweet spot is the smoothest idle with the highest RPM. Now your RPM should be set around 800 to 1000 RPM, and what I mean by the highest RPM is that in order to find your sweet spot, we have to adjust your idle mix screw to the lean and also to your rich. And it's going to fall, the RPMs are going to fall off. They're going to start to drop once you start going in those extreme directions. It's going to start to stutter, start to run crummy because you're starving it of fuel, or if you're giving it way too much fuel. So as we go, I mean, my fingers are almost making this arch right here. This is the highest RPM. Your RPM is going to start to drop off in this direction, say lean. Your RPM is going to start dropping off in this way with this is the rich. Once you find the sweet spot, your RPMs are going to be at the highest with the smoothest idle. So how we do that is you get your bike running, warmed up, choke is pushed in, maybe put a box fan next to your engine to kind of keep it cool while you're doing this. Wear gloves so you don't burn your wrist on your pipes depending on how close they are to your carburetor. And reach back in there, find your idle mix screw. Now for this first adjustment, you don't have to count how many turns you're going to turn this. You're just going to be listening for the RPMs to start to drop off or to start to run crummy, and that's where you're going to stop. So let's just say, and that's clockwise, to go lean. And we're just going to turn it, we're going to turn it. It's like, okay, right about there. The RPMs are really starting to kind of dive down. It's running crummy. Stop right there. Now you're going to turn it counterclockwise to go in the rich direction, and you are going to count the turns this time. So look underneath your carburetor, and as you're listening, now what's going to happen is it's running kind of rough right now. As you start to bring it back, it's going to start to run really good, and then it's going to start to run crummy again. So as you're going to count this, and it's going to, like I said, start to run really good. Keep going past that because you need to go into the rich spectrum. So now you're going to look down here. It's going to be like half, 1, half, 2, half, let's just say 3. 3, it's like, wow, yeah, the RPMs got to where they sound really good. Now they're starting to drop off again. It's starting to really sound crummy. You can smell a lot of gas. Stop right there. Well, what was your number? 3. Meet in the middle, 1.5. That's it. So now, clockwise, going towards the lean direction again, count it, half, 1, 1.5. That should be your sweet spot. You should be able to grab your throttle, blip it, it sounds killer, runs good. That should be your primo setting for your particular bike. Hey, here's another little check-off list that you can use when you're trying to diagnose your bike or really any carbureted engine. And here's another one that just kind of follows up from the last one that talks a little bit more about the air-fuel idle mix screws. Hey, who wants to fine-tune their carburetor? This is the last test, the spark plug test. You get to ride your bike. Grab a spark plug wrench and a pair of gloves. You're going to find a Goldilocks of a country road. It has to meet certain criteria. It has to be long. It has to be straight, preferably not an intersection for quite a long time. You shouldn't have homes with driveways and kids and businesses and stuff. It should be like cornfields on both sides or trees on both sides. It also has to have a shoulder or a pull off. It can't just have ditches on both sides. You need to pull your bike off safely away from traffic so you can pull your spark plugs. And please do not do this on the highway. Pulling off on the shoulder of a highway to play around with your plugs when cars and trucks are zipping by, it's just not a good idea. So let's keep it on the country road. You're gonna need to go through your gears and then hold the speed limit of that country road for about 30 seconds to about a minute. There's no reason to go 100 miles on this thing. What you're gonna do is bring your bike up to the speed of the country road, but right before you would probably shift in the next gear to drop your RPMs down to cruise, don't do that. Keep your bike in high revs, high RPMs for this duration. You need to have your bike under load so you get a proper spark plug reading. Once you start to see your pull off coming up ahead, you're gonna pull your clutch in, put your bike in neutral and kill your bike, turn it off. Let your bike coast into the shoulder of the road. The reason for that is you want your spark plug readings to be when you were in those high revs and under load. You don't want to go back into an idle and then that would be your last reading on your spark plugs as an idle. So pull off, you can let your bike cool down if you'd like, or just pull your plugs right then and there. Take a look at them. Are they tan? You're good. Remember the spark plugs that I showed you at the beginning of this video. There was some black around the rim. The center electrode, the side electrode were clean and nice. The insulator was tan. That's what you're looking for. You don't want to be too lean and you don't want to be excessively rich. If there's white or a lot of black, reach underneath your carburetor and make a fine adjustment on your idle mix screw. We're not talking about a half turn or a full turn at this point. We're talking about like a quarter of a turn or even an eighth of a turn. Put your plugs back in, go down to the beginning of the road and turn around and try the test again and see if you're going in the right direction. If you are leaning on either side of the fence, rich or lean, I would always suggest to lean onto the rich side because you're cooling your bike and there's no chance of you damaging internal engine components by the mixture of your fuel. If you run too lean, you could blow out your valves or your pistons and just your bike's gonna be super hot. Take a look at the plugs I showed you at the beginning. Tan insulator, beautiful, clean electrodes, and a little bit of black around the rim. You're set. It's gonna run so good. Once you're there, enjoy that country road and the rest of the road. Just go for a ride for the rest of the day, knowing that you've got a beautiful set of straight pipes and it's running primo. Here's a few more thoughts to consider when you're diagnosing your bike. First off, the 180 main and the 48 pilot are just suggestions. They're just a baseline to start with straight pipes. I don't know what kind of pipes you've got or what air cleaner you're going to run. You may have to change those out. The other thing to remember is that your pilot jet, also slow jet or idle jet, is just that. It's for idling up to about 15% of your throttle. From 15% up to wide open is your main jet. So if you're having problems getting the idle to run really good, that's going to be your pilot jet. And if you're having problems as it's riding, that'll be your main jet. Also, I can't stress enough to have a piece of paper and writing down the notes and the changes that you're making. Also, make those changes in like a scientific approach, meaning do one thing at a time. It's far easier to figure out if that one thing gave you an improvement or it went the opposite way. Well, that's about it. You should have a CV carburetor that's running primo with your straight pipes. If you feel like you could still benefit from some mid-range to top-end torque and power, take a look at my lollipop baffles video where I show you how to install a lollipop baffle or a thumb screw baffle. It creates back pressure in your straight pipes and gives you a little bit more of your mid-range and top-end power and torque. Until the next video, take care.